we've gotten through the first 10 sutras, 11 sutras really, because we talked about memory too. We talked about the 5 vrittis that are not part of, when you're resting in your ocean nature. And so now we're going to talk about how to, I was going to do that actually. Trying to move it with my mind. I did, she did it. Anyways, at this point, so we're going to talk we're going to get into the next section here. But the one thing we didn't really talk about is the yogic model of the mind. So I just gave you this, and this is a copy from HI, and I'm going to do a drawing to try to kind of walk you through it and explain it. Just like we have a physical anatomy that we look at when we're trying to teach yoga. We want to have, protect our knees, or we have to keep in mind what muscles are working, or, the key actions of the pose. Our mind also has an anatomy. And this is kind of hard to conceptualize because there's so much we don't know about the mind. And when I'm talking about the mind, I'm not really talking about the brain. The brain has been pretty mapped out, like as far as, okay, we have this section of the cortex that's responsible for this. We have this section or the limbic system that's responsible for this. It's still pretty mysterious, but we have it mapped out. But the mind is pretty elusive. There's still a lot we need to find out about the mind. So this is a model of the anatomy of the mind. As far as these things aren't physical, but these are some of the ways the mind functions. So they're all happening at the same time. And there's just like, your digestive system is breaking down food while your nervous system is doing this, while your reproductive system is somehow doing this, all underneath your control. We have the different parts of our mind that are working at the same time, and you can't really separate them out even as much as you can the physical system. They're not, but we try to, just to give them names, and like the kosher model, just to understand it, or the chakra model. So the first thing is, we have, I'm going to draw it my own way, and you can look at it on the board, on your paper. We have what we feel like is us, and then what we feel like is everything around us. So we've talked about this before. What is the interface between our experience as a separate identity, as us, and the world around us? What is the interface? Do you remember? You can look here if you're not sure. How do we understand the world around us at all?
Those senses.
The senses. Yeah. So in yoga, there's 11 senses. Okay? So we have, maybe here's the world with all the earth with all its land masses, and here's kind of us, and we have senses where we take in information about the world. So there's 5 that go in, and we've talked about these before, and we'll see them again when we talk about the chakras, because this comes up a lot. And they're your smell, taste, touch, hearing, and see. Not in the right order, but don't worry. So those are the ways we find out. We can smell things, we can taste, all of the ways. Those are our 5 senses, and how we understand the 5 senses. So we're constantly receiving sense impressions from everything in the world around us. And then we also have ways that we can act and respond in the world around us. And those are called these are called the cognitive senses. And the name for them in yoga is Gyan Indriya. Indriya is a sense. And Jnana, we know Jnana Yoga or Agya Chakra. That J and that weird little pinata N that makes the Gya sound. So these are Gyan Indriyas. So
How do
these
you
are
spell that?
Indriya is Indriya.
Oh.
And Jnana is J and with a squiggle, A-N-A. So we're not doing Sanskrit today, but your Sanskrit grammar of the day is when the A and the I come together, they are an E. So when you see it written, which you don't on here, it's, you know, this is an E instead of an A and an I. They put the whole word together and blend it with an E. You don't need to know that. But
It's kind of, I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to see the marker. What is the
Gyan, how do you spell it?
Gyan? Yes.
Jnana. Yeah, it is
Okay.
hard, and I'm sure you're not even gonna see it on the recording, unfortunately.
Pronounce it, please.
Gyan Indriya. Gyan Indriya. So there's a at the end, Jnana and Indriya. So you can't say Jnana Indriya. It's Gyan Indriya. Yeah, so it's sound in there.
So it's softy.
You usually see it spelled that way. If you ever see it spelled, you will maybe sometime.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I mean, you may, and it doesn't, I mean, Indriya, you may or may not see it. So those are the cognitive senses. They're what we, kind of take in, how we take in our sense impressions. And then we have the ones that are outgoing, and they're called the karmendriya. So karma and indriyas, there's another E there. Karma, what we're gonna see in the Bhagavad Gita in the next section is karma is an action or a result of action. So karma, indriya, is a sense that implies that they're more active. So they're called the active senses. And they go outward. There's 5 of them as well, and they're connected with the other ones. Have you all heard this? A little bit of a review?
200 hour, and it's finally making sense.
Yeah. It takes about 20 times until it makes sense. Or you're like, oh, wait, yeah, okay. I've seen this before. I'm starting to understand this. So what we can do, we can excrete, meaning we can go to the bathroom and decide to do that. We can procreate. We can walk. We can talk. And we can manipulate with our hands. So a lot of things that we do with our hands, like I'm holding a pen, so I'm able to write. I'm able to somehow get what's in here out here because I have this. So that means I'm doing something. Active. So these are the 10 senses where we either are acting upon the world or we're taking in upon the world. And then the 11th sense is called the manas, and this is really the first function of the mind. Manas is also often called like the lower mind. So, you see a red light and you stop. There's not much major decision making going on there. sometimes if you see a yellow light, there's a little bit more decision making. Should I speed up or should I really slow down and stop? But, you know, the red light, you're stopping, you know, so it's not really like you've had to check in with your conscience or whatever. That's just a response, okay? So this is Man's lower mind is just an interface. It's a processor. It doesn't really make decisions, you know? But what happens is, as we're doing this whole thing, day in and day out, we start to like get some preferences, you know? So like, say I see a yellow light and I run through it. Nothing really happens. No one saw me. I get away with it. So, kind of good experience, right?
Exciting.
It can be exciting. What's gonna happen the next time I see a yellow light?
T-bone.
Let's hope not. But I might have more of a tendency to do it again.
Yeah.
Right? Because it worked the last time, worked for me. I actually didn't have to slow down and stop, and no one saw me, got away with it. You know, it was kind of red when I went through it. It was orange. You know, so anyways, we gather this information and, you know, from everything that we do. And it goes into our memory bank, which is called the chitta. So the chitta stores impressions. It stores negative impressions, it stores positive impressions. You know, think about it another way. Like if I would have blown through the red light and it kind of really was red, to be honest, and I got pulled over and I got a hefty ticket, that might actually carry a little bit more weight in my mind to remember the next time it happened. Do you know what I mean? Like some of our more intense things that happen to us, when they're stored in the chitta, they carry a little bit more weight. Because we're really taking in, have you ever heard of the idea that like, you're taking in so much with your senses, but we don't really notice that we are? Like, you know, you might have, you know, if you ask, you know, how many fans are in this room, you might have to look around but you would have taken it in. But some of the things that like just carry a little bit more weight for us, they have a little bit more weight here in the unconscious. This is like the chitta is unconscious and some subconscious, like for, you know, it's a little different than Western psychology, but this is the storehouse of information.
Is it the same as, like this up here says chitta?
Oh, they're saying the whole mind's the chitta. No, it's the unconscious mind.
Okay.
I don't know why they did that. Wow, that's interesting.
Oh, and they spelled it with an H.
Well, remember, C is always CH. Remember, Sanskrit?
C is always C.
C is always CH. Chuck, chuck. So I just I'm saying chitta, but I didn't write the H.
Okay.
Okay, so actually, I don't know why.
Is it because of the sutras and how it's?
Well, chitta vritti nirodha, but they're really talking about the chittas. We're gonna see how this works, how they bubble up from the unconscious and subconscious.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other thing that starts to happen is, you know, when we're taking in information and we're just, you know, kind of remembering what happens, like we develop, you know, like I said, preferences, likes and dislikes. So, you know, I like kombucha in the summers. Like I don't like it in the winter, it's too cold for me, but I like it in the summer. And so like a lot of times when I'm at the grocery store or something, I'll pick up one and I'm like, oh, it's a little treat. And I was visiting Abby at work, my daughter. She works at Ashley's coffee company, and I was there like a little bit ago, and I saw this like blackberry vanilla kombucha, and it was homemade. And it was like $9. I was like, I'm getting it anyways. I got it, you know, I walked outside and I tried it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is good. You know, and I was like, wow. Sometimes like this homemade local kombucha is like really good and I really like it. And I actually just went back there before I came today and I saw it, I didn't buy it, but in my mind I was like, oh, I really like that, you know? So what happens is, as I'm having it, and that was tasting, I was tasting, I was like, oh, this is good, you know? It could be a little touch because I could feel it in my belly. If you've had kombucha, it's like a probiotic, so you can sometimes feel like your stomach is like just settling. It's nice. But I was like, I like this. So who's liking it? It's me. So there was like an identity that starts to develop, and that's another part of the mind. It's called the ahamkara. You'll see it there. It's like the ego. It is kind of like the ego. It is the ego. It's just, it's me. It's this sense of identity. But not like, oh, I'm so egotistical. It's just like there is a person here that likes this. And now when I go and I look at Kavita, I'll still buy that kombucha because it's less expensive, but I'll know that I really like the other one.
You need to start making it.
I know, I wanted to add that to my list, but you should see all of the things I'm making
Yeah.
right now. It's getting quite large and then my house is getting quite messy. So, I don't know, might have to leave that for somebody else. So there's this sense, and that's that function of the mind. It's me. Like, this was pleasant, this was unpleasant, okay? Then we have this other part of the mind, and it's called the booty. Not like your booty, it's just booty. It's more like a Buddha, not booty. So we also kind of have this, we all know we like have this inner divine part of ourselves that we're trying to connect with. And so that, where the earth is over here, not that the earth doesn't have that either, everything around us has that divine in it. But we have this inner divine that's more inward. And the Buddhi's job is to reflect that inner light out into the other parts of the mind. It's like a lens. So it's like discriminating mind. And this is the one that does actually make decisions. You know, it's, you know,
You probably shouldn't buy the $9 kombucha, like that kind of thing.
you know, like today I went and I'm like, do I need that today? Maybe that's a special thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe I decided, well, I'm really not gonna have it very often, but I'm gonna, when I do it, I'm gonna do it big. And I'm gonna always buy the $9 and never anything else, but I'm not gonna do it very often. Like, it's this part that, you know, but even more in a situation, so maybe, you know, maybe you have a friend that has a total different schedule than you, and you really enjoy being with this friend, but they stay up like really late at night. And you get up super early in the morning. And so you're tired. And like, so what the discriminating mind is gonna be like, is like, hey, if I do this every night, I'm either gonna be needing to take naps during the day, or, you know, it's, you know, you have to like, it figures it out. You know, it's not like, it's like kind of the part that sees what you're doing and says, this would be the wise thing to do.
The two shoulders.
It could be like our conscience, you know, but what we're trying to do here, you know, do you know how like we sometimes feel more connected to that and sometimes less?
Yeah.
Like maybe if you're super stressed out, you don't really feel connected to that part of you.
Yeah.
It's just not there. That's the idea. It's always there, but sometimes we are not as, this divine thing is always there inside of us, but sometimes we are, it's clearer and sometimes it's a little bit more cloudy.
Does it get more cloudy because the ego gets in the way, or it's not like that?
Yes, and everything else. So let's see. First of all, it can get more cloudy all the way out here at the senses. If you're taking in more information in your senses than you can handle, that's just too much. It's overwhelming to the system. And then you get embroiled in that kind of thing, okay? So look at what we do. When we talk about resting the senses, what yogic practice are we usually talking about? Relaxation. Relaxation techniques rest the senses. We stop doing everything with our senses. You might hear, because you're hearing the instructions, that that is the finest sense. And the relaxation techniques, we'll talk about this with Yoga Nidra, they're meant to be done by yourself, ideally, but we're teaching people how to do them, so we do them in class. And they're not going home and doing them a lot of the time. So, they're not guiding themselves through that process. So it's not a perfect story. We're resting the senses, and then the lower mind, we're giving it something to do. We're rotating the consciousness so it doesn't start thinking about other things. So we're basically taking care of the senses when we do relaxation. And because the first 3 steps of relaxation are the relaxation steps are the first 3 steps of meditation, we're also doing this in meditation. So what's gonna happen is that when we take away all of this, it's great because we need to every once in a while. There's too much stuff going on. We don't have time to process it all. But what happens to you when you meditate? When you quiet down, what starts to happen?
Sometimes notice like a more one-pointed guided thought process. Or maybe something becomes very clear about a situation
Yes.
that was freaking me out in the cluttered mind.
Okay, so this could be becoming more clear, especially if you have a focus for your mind.
So Buddhi is the lens through which the divine self shines.
I feel like it's what I call like intuition, and I also think of like David Lynch talks a lot about how he gets his creative ideas, and I wonder if that's like the Buddhi self in meditation.
It is.
I think it's not my parents saying you should do
Right.
this, my internal parent being discerning, it's the kind of still small voice.
Yes.
That's, and sometimes they align and sometimes they don't.
So
Sometimes
what's happening when they don't?
when they don't,
So when you're in meditation and you can't quite connect, what is actually happening?
The mind's distracted.
yeah,
What's distracting you in the mind? Because we're doing all these functions of the mind. Thoughts. What are the thoughts usually about?
mine are a lot of to-dos, a lot of tapes going on in my head of conversations, a lot,
What if?
until I still.
Yeah, it's
more-
kind of sometimes based on what we've already deposited, predicting what's going to happen or thinking about how to handle it, or remembering from the past. Those 5 vrittis that we did in the first part of the Yoga Sutras, that's what starts to happen. And where they're coming from is here. They bubble up from the subconscious, unconscious. And they start bothering us, and this is why people don't like meditation. Because they shut down, and then all these things that they maybe do not want to look at, they start coming up because they're in there and they haven't been processed. And a lot of times, I believe that's why sometimes, these active senses, that's why people stay so busy with them. Because they don't want to quiet down and process anything there. Like, let me run around and be a workaholic or, have too much sex or be promiscuous. I don't want to know, so where I am. That's just being human, so.
And Kate, were you saying that the Shitty is like head loaded on like the, for lack of a better word, but like the negative things that have happened?
Also positive,
Okay.
if you have, I mean, but the only thing is, and we're gonna see with the Yoga Sutras, they're both painful in the end, positive and negative, because what happens if like you have the best day of your life? Well, what if that's already over? Could I have another best day, or am I gonna feel bored, or, you know what I mean? It's like that idea that we are so extreme, and like, sometimes people have a hard time with just being like not really intense in either direction.
So it's kind of anything that made a strong impression.
Yes,
One way or
it's a
another.
strong impression. Some of the, I mean, that's what's gonna bubble up. I mean, if you think about something you don't care about, like, oh, there really are 2 fans in here. 3 if you count the air conditioner, like no one cares. So you don't, even if you know that, you're like, that's not gonna bubble up as something important. But if you had a fight with your friend, that probably is bubbling up when you're gonna sit down for meditation, because yeah, they bother you, or you're like, I don't know what to do about that, you know? So that's what's happening. And so what we need to do, because this really does get in the way of this shining through. It does for everybody. And it doesn't matter how long you meditate, your stuff is still gonna come up. So it's not like you're gonna always just be resting in bliss, because that's actually not what's gonna happen, you know? So what we do in meditation then is we, I mean, relaxation is really just this, just so you have, because we're talking about teaching meditation and everything, it's really just the senses and lower mind is circling around so it's not distracted. But when we get to meditation, we then choose a mental focus. And that's why the mental focus is important, because what we try to choose is something that comes from, there's things that are closer to here. There's things that are more sacred than profane, let's say. Like, so, and that, I'm not even meaning that religiously at all. I'm meaning that, like, if you go to the museum and you see like a beautiful piece of art, you feel uplifted and you feel like, oh my gosh, that artist is so creative. How could they have come up with that? And you actually feel a little bit creative just for seeing it. You know what I mean? It's like great. So there are things that carry a little bit more of a higher vibration. It can be music, it can be art, it can be something in nature that you see that kind of takes you and suspends this for a second. You know, it could be a good movie that, like, not like Rambo, but something that's a little bit more feel good, lift up, or creative. Inspired, yeah. And so what we're trying to do is, like, because when we're learning the alphabet and they have all those characters and all of them carry an energy, is we're trying to get people to a more inspired place that's still powerful and subtle. So what we try to do is the mantras are a little closer to here, or you try to pick something to meditate on that's a little closer to here. So mantra, you know, there are some visualizations that you can do in meditate, like full moon, they're taking from nature. There can be prayers, but they're like everything is a little higher than our everyday thinking. I love how Joseph Campbell explained it. He said, you know, if you're on the really busy streets of New York, and everything's just noisy and bustling, and you step into, like, I think it's St. Paul's Cathedral is there. Yeah. And there's like just this like elevated feeling. Doesn't matter if you're religious or not, it's just a different feeling. And then you go back out onto the noisy road sometimes you feel a little different when you walk back out. And that's what a mantra is supposed to do. That's how he describes a mantra. And I think that's great, because that's actually what we're trying to do. We are in these ruts of our thinking because they get habitual. And the thing is, like I said, with the red light or the yellow light, if you do it once and you get away with it, you're gonna do it again. A lot of our actions are habitual. They're based on what we've already done. And that's really what we're gonna see coming up in these next sutras. And so what we're really trying to do with the mind is find something else to rest in that's a little bit more elevated. So you're gonna see these ideas all through the Yoga Sutra. And it's like, not like you need to tell your classes this at all, unless you really want to do a deep dive into yoga philosophy. And I suggest practicing it a couple times, because it doesn't, you need to, it's not easy. Maybe we'll have you practice teach this. Yeah, it's good to do, because then you know if you got it or not, and or what parts you don't have. But this is really, like, this is the different functioning of the mind. This is different ways the mind works. We have a subconscious, unconscious, we have a sense of identity, we have a interface that's processing the senses, and we have a more discriminating mind. And so we're always trying to work. So you have the handout that I just gave out. I also uploaded that to the Google, the module 3. So if you want to save it to your files, you have it. They've redone this. And I mean, I guess one thing I like about it, I'll say one thing I like about it is that the whole thing is the mind. If they're calling the mind the chitta or the manas, either way, all of this is contained within the mind. So I like that way of drawing it as well. So Lynette?
You said save it. Is there something I'm supposed to be saving?
No, I mean, if you want to open the PDF and save it to your files, you can do that.
These are my printed files.
Yeah, you know, what I found is I do have a lot of things on PDF, because then if I want to teach them, like,
Yeah.
I was surprised that this isn't in your manual. So I was like, I can find it, I can save it as a PDF, and then I can give it to you. Yeah. Okay, so let's get back into the Yoga Sutra now and try to see how this relates. So the last one we did was 111. And it's like the one about memory. So memory is really not being able to let go of past experiences. We keep thinking about them in our mind and reliving them in our mind. So it's a vritti. It's a thought form. So basically, we get to 112, and it says all of these vrittis can be attenuated through practice and non-attachment. So this is where Patanjali is saying, here's what we're doing. If you remember the other triangle that we did, we had practice and non-attachment. So we talked a lot about practice and non-attachment. But what I thought is, if you have your books, we could go through and read the commentary on 112, because it's pretty interesting, and I think it'll tie into the model of the mind. So, does anyone not have their book? Because I'll skip if you don't have it. I'll skip you. Okay. So we are on page 37 of The Secret of the Yoga Sutra. What's that?
I'm just getting back, Jack.
Oh, good. Yeah. Be comfortable. So I'll read it, and then we'll just start around, do a paragraph at a time. Is that okay? All right, so that can be controlled through practice and non-attachment.
By telling us that ardent practice,
Abhyasa, good,
and non-attachment are
Vairagya.
vairagya, bring the roaming tendencies of the mind to a halt, Patanjali is making a powerful and conclusive statement. We have the capacity to arrest our thoughts and attain mastery over our mind. By training the mind to be clear, calm, and one-pointed, we can change the nature of our thoughts and emotions and achieve mastery over our body, senses, speech, actions, and the world around us. We can be confident in our decisions and pursue our goals fearlessly. The formula for transforming our mind is simple and straightforward. Abhyasa,
Abhyasa
and
Vairagya.
vairagya.
The literal meaning of abhyasa is practice. Vairagya means non-attachment. These terms are the backbone of yoga sadhana and should not be taken lightly. Together they constitute a time-tested technique for removing the causes and conditions of inner unrest and creating conditions leading to samadhi. Vyasa states, arresting the roaming tendencies of the mind is dependent on a twofold technique. This twofold technique is abhyasa and
Vairagya.
vairagya.
This commentary will use the original Sanskrit terms because the literal translations, practice and non-attachment, do not convey the precise meaning intended by Patanjali and Vyasa. As we will see in the following sutras, abhyasa means making an ardent effort to retain an inward peaceful flow of mind, free from roaming tendencies. Vairagya means cultivating a mind free from the coloring of deeply embedded mental impressions, vasanas. Abhyasa and vairagya are not two separate practices, but two intersecting parts of one practice. They are integral to a well-defined system of sadhana, the aim of which is to acquire a peaceful mind endowed with the power of discernment. It is with this peaceful and discerning mind that we will reach samadhi. Understanding how abhyasa and vairagya form a complete system of yoga sadhana and how they infuse other systems of spirituality, with life is crucial to understanding the essence of spirituality itself.
Let's stop there just for a second.
Excuse me.
So you see, what he's saying is basically we're looking for this peaceful mind. That is the definition of yoga, is mastery of the mind. And then he's saying it is with this peaceful and discerning mind. So you can see, where did I see that? It was like the power of discernment is, acquire a peaceful mind and down with the power of discernment. So that power of discernment is the buddhi.
Yeah.
Discerning mind? Okay.
Oh, right. We all want to be happy, but two inseparable problems block our happiness. We are unable to stop being negative, and we do not know how to start thinking and acting positively. We want to remain unperturbed, but instead we become upset. We do not want to drown in remorse, yet we cannot let go of self-incrimination. The same is true of anger, grief, and the desire for revenge. We know fear and insecurity are crippling, but we cannot staunch these feelings. We want to be happy. We know peaceful, positive thoughts are the foundation for a happy, healthy life, but we are not motivated to actively seek and embrace peaceful, positive strategies. Why? The answer lies in the link between our deep-rooted habits and our current mental behavior.
According to yoga philosophy, the causes of our thought patterns have a much deeper source than we normally realize. Our inner world is propelled by our habits, which in turn govern and determine the nature of our emotions, thoughts, speech, and actions. Our habits form our personality. They have a powerful influence on our unconscious behavior as well as on our conscious decisions.
Samskaras are strong habits deeply embedded in our own mind. They shape our inner world. The strongest samskaras are known as vasanas. Vasanas means coloring. A vasana is a samskara that has become so strong and irresistible that in the normal course of life, its influence is inescapable. Vasanas color the mind, giving it no opportunity to see the truth independently. The mind's comprehension is molded by the attributes and characteristics of our vasanas. We see what our vasanas allow us to see. Our sense of pleasure and pain, good and bad, right and wrong, is largely dependent on the nature of our vasanas. So how are samskaras and vasanas created? How do they gather so much power? How do they exert such an irresistible influence over our mind?
Okay, let's stop here for a second. Good. So vasanas are, we see what our vasanas allow us to see. What does that mean to you?
Denial,
Perspective.
perspective.
One of the terms for vasana, one way to think about vasana is, we have a lot of habits, like the samskaras are like habits that we get or grooves in our mind. And as we collect like kind of a system of habits, a personality develops. And personalities come sometimes very similar to a vasana. But so how do you think we see, how do you think what we see is colored by what our personality or our vasanas allow us to see?
Say that one more, ask that again.
How do you think what you see or what you perceive is shaped by your personality?
Well,
Well, you see what you want to see, you see
Yeah.
what you,
identify.
I mean, this is kind of pretty big now, and this is why I think yoga is so important, because we are all raised in whatever family or whatever, I don't know, or country or whatever, it's what we're exposed to. Like, how can we perceive something that we have never, what our conditioning is shapes how we see things. And we can't really escape it. However, we can do yoga and get some detachment and say, oh, maybe this isn't the only way to perceive this. This is just because I, grew up here. Or like maybe, maybe you had, you grew up in a family where, there was no really touching, or no one talked about emotion, or no one said I love you, or whatever. How are you gonna know how to do that? You know what I mean? You can't, but that is a possibility to do that. Not that it's important, maybe it's not important, but I'm just saying, using that as an example, to say, sometimes we get used to something being a certain way because that's the only thing that we've seen, and that's kind of developed who we are. So that's gonna kind of determine how we see things.
And then you interface with the world and you start to be like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, so many of us have kids going off to college, or you have, or you will, or, it's like a new world for them because they have grown up here with us, and they're then put into the pot with people who have done things a lot differently. And that is like so eye-opening. I mean, it's probably, if you were in that situation, it's eye-opening for you. I think about, the Amish who have their year of, like when they're 18, Rumspringa or whatever. It must be like, what in the world? And that's why we love those shows, because it's like, it's like, wow, how do they deal with it when they get out into this world and they start seeing all this other things, like, they talk about English clothes, or, they're, different, even though they're in Pennsylvania and Ohio, they're talking about English clothes, like these, jeans, as opposed to the whatever trousers or whatever they're wearing, or dresses, and it's like, but all of us have that. It's just more obvious when we're looking at somebody else. And that's what yoga is saying, is that some of these become so strong, we just don't even know that they're there. And that's the help of the mantra, and that's actually why it's kind of important for, like, not you to pick your mantra. I mean, there's some mantras that are universal, like the Gayatri or the Mahamrityunjaya. But that's the idea of working with a teacher and getting an initiation, because of your grooves, you're in the soup sometimes, and you can't really see the most helpful thing for you. I think I told you, did I tell you about my friend who's a teacher and, she's having all this crazy stuff going on. And I was like, oh, what mantra are you doing? You know, Ganesh, the remover of obstacles.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh, well, Ganesh also creates obstacles so you can learn from your going through the obstacles.
Oh my God.
So you might not wanna do that, or you might wanna think about that for right now. But like sometimes, not that that was what was creating it, but you know, I mean, it might not be the most helpful thing, maybe the Mrityunjaya would be more helpful in that situation, or something like just nourishing.
Yeah.
Just like,
Instead of like ass kicking.
yeah. Yeah, and like, think about your yoga practice. Like, you probably do the things that you like.
Yeah.
And the same things all the time.
You teach us.
And then you go to someone else's class and you're like, I mean, I do this all the time. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot about that. I should probably do that. You know, so we get into our, you know, and this is what this is saying, it's hard to see beyond that idea of like, well, we can't trust anything we hear about Columbus, but the idea that when the ship, like, oh, you know, when the ships came in, the native, they didn't know, they couldn't see them because they didn't have any concept of what ships were.
Yeah.
It may or may not have happened, however, the idea is interesting, isn't it? You know? So this is what this is saying.
So all roads have to lead to bliss.
Wow, super interesting, yes. And like in Tantra, which is probably, you know, it's helpful. Tantra is helpful because Tantra is actually the world the way it is. You know, there's what we would perceive as negative stuff just as much as positive. It's all there.
That's what Ram Dass uses, the stuff of the world.
Yeah.
As, you know.
Yeah, it's not
It's
like,
work.
you know, and it can be overwhelming. But yeah, it's all there. And not rejecting any parts. Well, not that we say, oh, we're not gonna do this, like there's some things that are just mean, bless you. But, bless you, we all know we have a tendency to be mean, right? Have you felt that in yourself? Of course, we're human beings, you know? So, is it gonna do us any good to aspire to be a saint and then not like ourselves when we're actually human? It's actually setting ourselves up for something really hard. And we talk about like the shadow self, the parts of ourselves that we don't like to look at or we're just kind of not aware of or lurking in the background, but like if you bring them to light and you have some self-acceptance, you know, and realize that this is the stuff of being human, it's more kind of real than just a kind of this fairyland utopia. So, anyways, I just think that that's interesting, that the way we perceive things really depends on, you know, what we have perceived, you know? So, let's keep going. So he wants to show us how this is working, and this, I think you'll probably really be able to connect with the model of the mind. I'll read, this is my turn. Every action we perform, physical, mental, or verbal, creates an impression in our mind. Each time an action is repeated, these impressions become stronger. This is how habits are formed. Habits can be erased when they are new and relatively weak. But if we continue repeating them, the groove they make in the mind deepens and they become samskaras, which then motivate us to perform similar actions. This well-defined process is known as Vritti Samskara Chakra. As it gathers momentum, it further reinforces our subtle impressions, our samskaras, until they become self-sustaining. At this stage, they are vasanas.
Figuratively speaking, asanas color the mind so completely, it loses its pure, pristine, transparent qualities. It no longer sees things as they are, but instead perceives the world through the lens of its vasanas. Our desires, feelings, thoughts, intentions, and ambitions are all affected by our vasanas. We become their product and thus have little control over our thoughts, speech, and actions.
Attenuating and ultimately eliminating our vasanas is difficult. We have not yet purified our mind, so it's operating under the influence of the prejudices and conditioning established by our vasanas. Attempting to identify and delete our vasanas with the help of a mind overwhelmed by vasanas is like one drowning man attempting to rescue another. The only solution is to cultivate a mind endowed with the ability to stop itself from drowning, and then employ this transformed mind to encounter and eventually conquer the dimensions of the mind that are still smeared with negative vasanas. This is accomplished with abhyasa. In other words, the
Vairagya.
vairagya. We rid ourselves of old mental habits, and with abhyasa we create new.
Okay, let's stop here for a second. Like, so how do we get out of this mess? Remember, practice are the things that make us stronger. So they are the things that help us focus. Then we can let go of the old mental habits. When I read this, the thing that's been so prevalent in the last year is this awareness of systemic racism. And we are all white people here, so it's crazy to think how much we are unaware that we are doing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And it's like because we can't see it.
the biases, like the
Yeah, and it
unconscious
can be overwhelming, but I think this is helpful to think if we just keep practicing, if we keep making ourselves stronger and, building our strength in our mind and our body and being willing to look at this stuff, that is our way out. Just like anything else, but it can be overwhelming. Like, what are we gonna do? Seems like we're in a thing that we can't climb out of. But and that's just one example, but I feel like that's pretty prevalent right now. We're talking about it, and it has been, I know for me, I've been shocked at some of the things that I've been doing that haven't been helpful. I didn't know. I really didn't know, and I'm sure there are a million more, So, but it's, it's very humbling, and for me, I know for myself, I want to be open. I want to know, I want to understand, but the thought, like sometimes, for myself, I do become a little overwhelmed, like how are we going to even do this? And I think this is hopeful. Okay, so we just practice, we keep doing the things that make us strong, and then we start to look at this and let some of it go.
And is this saying to that last sentence that so in other words, with,
Non-attachment.
yeah.
We rid ourselves of the old mental habits.
So it's really the non-attachment. that
Yeah.
kinda
Yeah, because remember, practice is making yourself stronger. It's like everything you do with yoga, meditation, it's an inner. And your non-attachment is moving towards balance in your relationship with the external world, usually. So it's like, yeah,
So it would be like noticing a tendency, but not
yeah.
but having a space though, so you're not like totally in it.
Yeah. As soon as you notice it, you have a space there.
Yeah,
It's like,
Exactly.
And then replacing with something else and practicing.
And sometimes practicing that, because it's like, it doesn't, we've all been like, oh, I'm doing this and it's not helpful, but you watch yourself doing it for a fair amount of time longer before you decide to finally give it up. Yeah.
So like practice makes me stronger, it also creates the space to develop awareness through which I can begin to practice non-attachment.
Yeah. Think about it this way. Someone totally embroiled in attachment. What you could say is like addiction, is that, because it's what the sense is, and then you're totally addicted to something. Shopping, whatever. And then, if you're gonna tell someone that has something that they're using that is making them feel better to stop doing it, is kind of just cruel. Like, you wanna do something that makes them stronger, so that they can keep being stronger and they can slowly let go of that. It works much better, I think.
Yeah, but it's their stuff. You know, I'm not
Oh.
supposed to be clearing their
But
stuff.
what you're doing as a yoga teacher, and this is how you can think of it. No, you're not clearing your stuff, but you are teaching them how to practice yoga. So you're giving them the tools. You're saying, okay, we're gonna do breath work, or we're gonna do, some asana, so that they feel stronger and they feel collected and more aligned with that divine part of themselves, so they can then do it themselves. I mean, or you can refer them out to someone with some expertise in that area. But that's what our job is. We are working on mostly the practice side as yoga teachers. Can you see that? We're teaching people how to practice yoga. We're not getting embroiled in their life. That's not what we're doing.
Because I'm supposed to be unattached.
You're supposed to be in balance with your students. At least with your students. Like, you're a nice guy, but like as soon as you, and you can like say, oh, it's really great to do your tongue scraper every day. You can talk about it, it's great. But if you start like texting them at 6 a.m., did you do it yet? Like you have crossed the line.
Yeah, that's like being in control.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing breaks of codependence.
Yeah, so we don't want to do that for sure. But we are offering, even like, I remember one time I was talking to Rolf, and I was trying to get my friend to come to this retreat with me. It was Rolf was giving it, and I was like, oh, I want her to come. And she just didn't come. And I was having a hard time with it. I don't even know why. This is like, and he was like, Kate, whenever that happens, you just say, oh, that's too bad for them. That's okay. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I was getting all attached, and they're getting this information, and that's not my job. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. And this helps it make really clear. For ourselves, we are starting to look at our tendencies that aren't helpful to us. But for other people, we are yoga teachers and we're teaching the practice of yoga. Okay, so we only have a couple more paragraphs.
Oh, is it my turn?
I think so.
Where, are we on?
Abhyasa enables.
Okay. Abhyasa enables us to tap the wellspring of the power of discernment, viveka. With Abhyasa, we create samskaras that help the mind cultivate a taste for peace, stability, and introspection. As we continue nurturing our practice of Abhyasa, the samskaras it engenders become stronger. Eventually, the grooves created by sincere and prolonged Abhyasa become so ingrained they begin to influence the mind from deep within. These new, deeply ingrained impressions are also vasanas. But because they're generated by Abhyasa and imbued with its properties, they are endowed with the unique power to neutralize negative vasanas. These new vasanas are the result of a well-designed yoga sadhana, which is accompanied from the outset by viveka, the power of discernment. Abhyasa and the deep mental grooves it creates embody the intention that propelled us to undertake the practice in the first place. So. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to, it's like trying to take a
Woo, okay, so what do you see there? What do you see?
It's making good groups, like groups that will help
So that's what we're trying to do, is take them over there. The good grooves come from over there. And they make our mind stronger.
In summary, Abhyasa helps us create a new cast of mind, one that enables us to clearly see the negative asanas and the aspect of mind propelled by them. This new mindset helps us see without fear and doubt. We are able to decide what type of samskaras and vasanas must be deleted, and we are confident that we will delete them. In this way, Abhyasa assists Vairagya in deleting the negative vasanas, thus freeing us from the unwanted aspects of our past.
By itself, however, Abhyasa has a potential weakness. If we are not careful, we may become attached to the process of making an ardent effort to retain the mind's peaceful flow and to the fruit that flows from it. Attachment undermines the purity of Abhyasa and may have negative consequences. This is where Vairagya assists Abhyasa, allowing us to make a deep commitment to our practice of Abhyasa while keeping us free from anxiety about its fruit.
This twofold technique leading to the cessation of the mind's roaming tendencies does not refer to a particular spiritual discipline or path, but to the fundamental principle that makes a spiritual discipline valid and effective. The principles of Abhyasa and Vairagya make a perfect path. Only a perfect path can lead us to perfection.
Yeah, so don't worry about the last paragraph. Yeah, isn't that funny? It's like, oh, but do you know yourself or other people that get attached to being perfect or doing it right? And like, so with yoga, you know, they are attached to being the perfect yogi or, you know, so that's what he's saying there. Without non-attachment, we can get attached to our practice.
Yeah, you become attached to the thing you're trying to use.
It used to be
get
strong.
Unattached,
Yes.
Or you get attached to like having a good meditation practice.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't a good practice.
Yeah, exactly. And so we want to be careful of that. That's why they go together. So,
That's interesting.
yeah, it is. Well, here we can say, in the next 4 sutras, Patanjali explains the exact nature of Abhyasa and Vairagya, how they are mastered, and how they can lead us to experience samadhi. So that's what he's setting us up for. It's like, just like Patanjali and everything else, like when he said, okay, there are 5 vriddhis, he lists the vriddhis, and then the next ones he explains each one. He's saying here, you know, the roaming tendencies can be mastered by practicing non-attachment. And then he's going to take the next 4 sutras just to explain what practice is, what non-attachment is. So what I can tell you, you can look at these, you know, just you know, not the commentary, but I would suggest, you know, read the commentary because as you can see, it's really great as far as explaining these and thinking about it. So he's just, in 113, he's just defining practice is the ardent effort to retain the peaceful flow of mind free from roaming tendencies. So let's just talk about what's your experience with that. Like, you know, generally they're talking about meditation, but it could be asana, paying attention to, you know, being mindful the whole class and not going off into your mental dialogue. Basically, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm paying attention to what, you know, I've decided to pay attention to. And then there's other times where you're just off in your story. So is there any tricks that you've come up with for staying focused?
Finding the breath.
Breath.
And I mean, not that I can do this every time, but doing some movement, you know, especially if I've been sitting all day and I, you know, doing work. So movement, breath.
Eliminating distractions.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I get distracted really easy. I hate doing yoga at home because I'm cold all the time. And it's all that I can focus on.
Oh, yeah.
Like the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying.
Yeah. No,
You know,
setting
like
yourself
no matter
up.
what, I'll like forget about it and then I'll like come back to it. It's like, gosh, just like, you know, hamper it, and I just can't.
Well, that's why creating an environment is important, you know, it is. That's why we tell people to do that, because it does, like the distractions are, they're distractions. You know,
And just having some way of just checking in with yourself, you know, whatever that is, to, just to bring awareness.
Sometimes you don't even know you're being distracted till you realize you're being distracted.
that's exactly, most of the time.
Yeah.
And what I do sometimes, and like a lot of times actually, is just have a period at the beginning where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch my breath. And then I'm gonna let my mind roll. When it starts to roll, it's just gonna roll, and then I'm gonna watch my breath again. Like I just
Yeah.
let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then bring it back. Okay, now I'm watching. I wonder how long I'll watch it before it starts rolling again. Oh, there I am rolling again.
Yeah.
And then I come back and watch it again. And then after a couple times, like I give myself that time. So that after a couple of times, I'm like, oh, you know what? Let's focus on your breath. Like, let's do this now. You know, but I take my time, and it feels so much better to do that.
That really helped me. You said that a long time ago, and that helped me so much because I realized I was being hard on myself. And then it's like getting preschoolers to, okay, get your energy out, you know,
Yeah.
everyone,
Yeah.
it just helped so much. It was really, really,
It's kinder too.
yeah, it is.
Because we all do it. You know what I mean? So just give yourself time to like,
Sometimes I just laugh when I realize that like, I can't change this.
yeah, no, I mean, your thoughts they're powerful. That's why I think they're writing about this. This has gone on for centuries, millennia, like, you know, this is a thing. These thoughts are powerful and they pull us away. So that's okay. Just come back whenever you realize it, and then after a while, be like, okay, now I'm gonna just really try to rest in this for a little bit of time so I get the benefits.
I don't know if it was Jack Cornfield or who it was that talked about training a puppy. And that being kind to yourself and just recognizing that this is gonna happen and just, bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, we are hard on ourselves, I think, and you know, if you think about how you would, you know, treat a puppy or a little kid or, you know, whatever, it's gonna be different than sometimes how we treat ourselves. So, yeah. But anyways, that's what it is. So you think about, oh, okay, what do I need to do to stay focused? And then that's your practice. And then 114 is, this is still about practice. That becomes firm only when done for a long period of time with no interruption and with reverence. So if you want to cultivate this, you know, kind of connection to your inner self, which you're going to have at times anyways, whether you cultivate it or not, it's there. But if you really want to practice doing this kind of at will, you have to do it for a while. It's not like you can meditate for 3 weeks and you're done. Although you will see improvement in 3 weeks, I do believe. But, you know, it has to be like a thing that you do for a while. And without interruption means like, you know, you can't say, I mean, it's not really good to do it like school. We do school. Like you can't say, okay, from September to June, I am going to practice meditation and then I'm taking the summer off. It just like, that's a lot of interruption. That's a lot of slide back. We all have a little slide back from time to time, but you know, the idea is if you want to master something, you can't really be away from it for a long time. And reverence, that's an interesting one here. Like a respect and a liking of your practice. Like I'm doing this because it helps me. So appreciating your practice. So you can read that, that's about that. And so there's 2 unpracticed, and there's gonna be 2 on non-attachment. So we just did the 2 practice ones. So 115 is non-attachment, known as Vashikara Samgya, belongs to the one who is free from the craving of sense objects and objects mentioned in the scriptures. That's super weird there, but what that means is, our senses is what connect us to the external world, so we can get carried away and attached because of them. Like if I like kombucha and I start maybe, well, you know what, I'm not gonna make dinner tonight, kids, I'm going to get this instead. That's kind of moving out of balance, But same thing is we wanna feel good. We always wanna feel good. So what they're talking about with the description thing is sometimes people read about things that are to come in a heaven or whatever, and this is just saying we can get attached to that as well. So we don't wanna get attached to, making ourselves feel good at any cost. Or, we just wanna be they always talk about with the senses. A lot of times they'll use in the different mantras or whatever, you'll see it's a horse, and the horse, you rein in the senses, you rein in a horse, you have control of them and you're directing them, you would direct a horse, not that you are engaged with the world, but you are not letting it run off this way, or, you have to manage them. And be honest with yourself. If you're doing something that's kind of out of balance, noticing, like we said, is the first step. So
if I start to get overwhelmed, I have to rein in.
something, it depends on what overwhelms you.
A busy schedule.
Well, that's walking too much, moving about. Moving about the world is too much. And so, that needs to be, I remember, I think I might have told you, one time I was doing the Ayurveda training, and I was just really tense, and I was okay, I have time before dinner to take a walk. And Dr. Rosie, she was the, Ayurvedic doctor, she was I think you just need to go down and lay in your bed. Don't do anything else. And it was so helpful, I did it, and I was I felt so much better. But because I was propelled, I was in motion, there was part of me that wanted to stay that way, but that wasn't really what I needed. We just get used to doing that. So sometimes a busy schedule is too busy, Okay, so let's look at 116, and like I said, these are great commentaries, but I doubt we will ever get through this if we read all of them. So the highest level of non-attachment leading to self-realization takes place when the aspirant is free from all forms of desires, including the desires that resulting from the interplay of sattva, rajas, and tamas. So those are the gunas.
Tamasic is heavy, Rajas is spicy or sharp.
Active, super active. Most of us are rajasic. Most of us are busy and our minds are busy, this is, if we look at this, para always means high, in the highest level in Sanskrit, just if you see that word. Just first sentence here. Paravaragya is the highest form of non-attachment, a state of consciousness in which we are fully established in our core being. In this state, the mind is so clear and tranquil that we see ourselves without distortion. And I love that because it's not saying that we're perfect, it's saying that we see ourselves clearly. So you read that one, because I really want to get through these next couple before we go to lunch. Okay, so we just covered practice of non-attachment and the sutras associated with them, and now we are going to talk about different forms of samadhi, and we touched on these in something else, and like I remember we talked about them. So now here's where they are in the sutras. So 117 is subpragyata samadhi. So you see the gya, that gyata means wisdom. Sampragyata samadhi is accompanied by either a gross object, a subtle object, joy, or the feeling of I amness. So basically, they're dividing samadhi into lower samadhi and higher samadhi. So both are good. And even don't feel bad if you've only attained lower samadhi, because it's okay, it's still samadhi. But basically what this actually means, like in the like really literal terms, is sampragyata is with a seed. So the seed is a focus for the mind. So in lower samadhi, we give, because the mind's always thinking, we give it something concrete to think about. And that something can be subtle, it can be a mantra, it can be not so subtle. I was thinking about all the different, forms of meditation, and like what the, I feel like where they differ is their mental focus. Like, what are you focusing on? That's going to make the meditation different, right? So, like, a lot of times, like, there's a lot of buzz about mindfulness, or at least there was a couple years ago. And a lot of the mindfulness exercises that you do are pretty not subtle. They're pretty, like, concrete. Like, you'll be doing something where you're listening to a sound that's produced outside of your body. Like, you'll hear a bell, or you'll taste a raisin or something like that, and notice all the textures and everything. It's still a meditation, you have a focus. But what that is, that sensory object is that's your seed that you're using. And for beginners, that's why that's so good, because that's where they are. They're not gonna sense, sometimes even the breath is too subtle for a beginner. Like, let them learn to focus on something a little bit more concrete first. Show them how to do it. Then, a more subtle focus would be the breath, because it's inside you. No one else is breathing outside of you, you're doing it. Sometimes we can connect it with vinyasa, like we can inhale, reach the arms up to help people, like, yeah, here's something gross, I'm moving my physical body, but I'm also now starting to pay attention to something more subtle at the same time. So my seed is getting a little bit more subtle here. See what I'm saying?
So is that a higher samadhi?
No, still not.
Okay.
Higher is no seed, it's without seed. So there's no focus whatsoever.
Which I'm starting to think that I probably in this lifetime will never reach higher samadhi.
I'm saying you already have.
Oh.
Yeah, you have. It's just that it's not done by will.
And it's probably just a split second
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, we really need to be doing with seed, because we
Yeah.
can't maintain it. Like, it's like, if we could stay there forever, we would, but we just do need something. And you might get to an elevated state where you just feel,
Yeah.
everything stops. But then you'll start thinking again.
Yeah.
So that's okay, then come back to your mantra. But yeah, what I'm saying is, even with the lower samadhi, the seeds are different. Do you see that? They become more subtle. So like the more external ones are gonna be less subtle. If you can, in asana, when you're doing your body and you're feeling this, body and the breath, you're starting to get more subtle when you start to talk about the breath in your asana classes, right? But then, saying the mantra is gonna be a little bit more subtle than your breath. So as we progress in our meditation, it's not, you don't have to think about it as progressing, but it kind of is. You go more subtle with your focus, because it works on a more subtle level. Because the mantras are gonna be really subtle and they're changing the grooves in your mind, or they're changing, more internally your states.
So say you were just doing a, you're in warrior one, you're bending your knee and you're straightening it. Could you add so hum to that as a focus, or is that not an application for what we're discussing at all?
You could,
Is that gonna confuse the class, or is that giving them a better seed?
I
more
think it
refined
might be a
seed.
little confusing at the level that we're
Yeah.
teaching. There are, like I said, there are some people that do it really well, but they don't use so hum. They're like, mini yoga combines a lot of mantra with movement. And they do it in a way that works. But if you try to do it, you might not, if you're not trained in, like I tried to do it and like it didn't work.
What
Yeah,
was the anticipated outcome when you tried to do it?
that everyone would like it and connect with it, and they didn't.
Could you just use it as a refinement, like, hey,
Yeah,
if you're in.
well, I mean, in general, like even in the sun salutations, like you've done with me, they all have a chakra focus, everything, like throat center, pelvic center, eyebrow center. They also all have a mantra in each place, you could say. But if you think about people coming into your class, they have to first learn how to do a sun salutation. They need to know the mechanics of it. Then they need to be able to sense for spaces in their body, which we all think like, oh, I can totally do that, that's super easy, but someone coming in isn't always able to do that right away. And then hearing the sound in the space, that's a tantric way of practicing yoga, to combine the physical, the breath and the mantra and the feeling. That's a great way to do it, but it's like you might do that for a more advanced class. Yeah. And the so hum, it's just like, is it going to alienate them or is it going to make them feel connected? Because it's going to be easier to teach them to so hum in a seated position probably, rather than moving. Yeah, I would think. So then we have asampragyata. So opposite of, remember Sanskrit? Not seed. So we'll just see what it says. And that will be enough. You guys did a great job here. The other higher samadhi is preceded by abhyasa, which brought all cognition to a complete halt. What remains is the samskara of abhyasa itself. Well, and there's 4 stages of lower samadhi that you can read about. So you can read this commentary, but I'll just read this. In higher samadhi, time and space are left behind and the law of cause and effect no longer applies. In this state of realization, we are free from all karmas and all the fruits of karmas. We see the truth in all of its purity and perfection. We are master of our destiny and live with the confidence that after death, we will have the ability to decide whether to or not to return. Well, that's living. But we live in a world while remaining above it. But really it's a state where maybe you're there, but you're not really thinking anything at all. You're just being. And like I said, I think we've all been there. It's just that we may not be able to just get there at will and hold it for a long time. And that mantra is supposed to lead us to that. Like, you're getting more and more subtle, but that would be like super subtle and connected. And there's not emotion in it, it's just, you're there. So, that is so great, because we covered all of the ones that I thought we should cover today. We really trucked right through, and you have the model of the mind. So, any questions before we break? Okay, Well, then it's lunchtime and Abby will be here at 3 to do relaxation. Yeah. Abby's here and then she'll be here in the morning tomorrow and then I'll be back for the tea party and more sunset or more yoga sutras. So.
So she's teaching from 3 to 7? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, Brian Dunn, last
Yes.
year, we were having some conversations about meditation last year. And he was telling me about, you know, he was going into just, yeah, he's so funny. Did he ever tell you the story about how he one time reached what he thought was samadhi and how it freaked him out? And he says he's never been able to achieve it again. Yeah.
But when you know you're there, you know you're there.
You do know you're there.
And that's what Judith Lasser said.
Yeah.
You know when you're there.
You know when you're
It sounds like he experienced something different, almost.
I don't know.
But
For me, it
freaked him out.
didn't sound different.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be scary
Yeah.
because remember, we're attached to our identity. We're gonna see that in the second chapter. That's one of our attachments. Part of being a human being is we don't wanna die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you achieve a feeling of almost like you're disappearing,
Yeah, I kind of
you know,
get
it can be scary.
sometimes in yoga nidra, I will get kind of to that point of, it is a little bit like disconcerting,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's so
You know,
relaxed, like,
take a deep breath.
yes,
And
yes.
come back to the surface.
Like maybe I could just stop breathing. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, if that is what it is, are you even really wanting that? Like, I mean, that's where we are, and that's how you can see, like, I mean, like I said, with the initiations, like, there's a sequential initiations that you can do where you work with a teacher and get like, it's like almost like different levels of initiation. Or it's called like Krama-diksha, and then there's the Mama-diksha where you're instantly enlightened. But like most people wouldn't wanna be.
Yeah.
Because then like cake doesn't taste good anymore, and like, I mean, it's no thanks, maybe tomorrow, yeah. So, yeah, so, okay, take a break, so you have, and, you know, take your time with it, you know, Abby too, like, you don't have to, like, right at 3 on the clock.
Cool. Which sutras did we get through all the way to
We 111 through 112 through 118.
Okay.
So we're gonna I'm gonna try to truck through the 20s tomorrow. The 20s of trustful surrender, Ishvara. Yeah. Get through those 20s. We got through the teenage years.
So we're gonna read the second and third and fourth books too?
No, there's no third and fourth. We're gonna do the second, and I'll tell you about the third and the fourth, but we're not gonna go in great detail because
And what book do we get for it?
you could get a general, like most books about the commentaries and yoga sutras have all 4 in one book.
Is there one you might recommend that I read? Think about it.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
I think I'm just gonna sit here.
You know, but
Yeah.
I am
Yeah,
so
Over Amazon, they're all